Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to wait for another few minutes to give everybody a chance to dial in. I would like to slowly but surely pass a word on to Kaumudi Goda, who's the COO of MetaMind. She is trained as a lawyer. She worked as a lawyer for 7 years before she made a pivot into the area of human resources and now is focusing on human capital development. And yeah, as I said, the topic is leading with self-compassion in uncertain times. Over to you, KG.
Thank you so much, Meta. Hi, everyone, and welcome. All right, so leading with self-compassion or self-compassion for leaders. That's our topic today. And before we begin, I'd like to share with you very quickly what we do at MetaMind Training. MetaMind Training is a coaching, consulting, and training organization. We also facilitate meetings and provide profile assessments. We have a range of leadership transformation programs. We cover topics like authentic leadership, inspirational leadership, inclusive leadership, change leadership, values and vision, diversity and inclusion, and the future of work. Our clients have loved some of these programs in the past on authenticity and authentic leadership, communicating and presenting with impact. Our Women in Leadership program is very successful. We also provide workshops and programs in cultural intelligence, culture transformation interventions, workshops in corporate well-being, and help your teams get better at creativity, collaboration, problem-solving skills. So if you're curious about any of these programs, or if you want to know more about what we do, reach out to any of us on this call, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. All right? At MetaMind, the one thing that unites all of us across different domains, backgrounds, and experiences is our passion to bring out the very best in you. So it is with great care and love that we put these topics together for you. And so the first thing I'd like all of you to think about and share with us in your chat box is, what is the most pressing concern you have about your own performance as a leader? Take a moment. Perhaps it's just a quick word, but type to Meta, what is the most pressing concern you have as a leader right this moment?
Feel free to type it to me in the chat box. You can go to Meta Johansson if you want to be anonymous, and otherwise you can chat it in, you can type it into the chat box for everyone to see. What's your most pressing concern about your performance as a leader right now? Uncertainty in immediate future. Yes, we can relate to that very much. KG, what about uncertainty in immediate future?
Absolutely.
Clients have gone in hiding, I'm getting here as well.
We empathize.
Yes, absolutely. And also, Rajesh, to everyone, status on my business post-COVID. So both about the immediate future and also what's going to happen after COVID. Any other comments of what are your most immediate or what are your most pressing immediate concerns?
On your performance as a leader, think of yourself and what you need to deliver and who you are as a professional. And what concerns do you have about your performance at this moment?
I have one here, pressure on my performance.
Mm-hmm.
One more, come on. The last one. The usual way of working will have to be changed. All right, with that, over to you, KG. Oh,
I hear you.
Business continuity model.
Very fair. What I'm hearing is both an awareness and perhaps deep sense of responsibility about everything that's going on and what you need to deliver. as well as a desire and an intention to be at your own peak performance. And that's something we can all respect. One of my favorite stories about this comprehension of what it takes, the toll these pressures can take on leaders, is from Ariana Huffington. Let me know if you've heard this story. Ariana said that she was working with her favorite thing in the whole world. She'd founded this company, a media house that had become a massive sensation across the globe. It was called Huffington Post. Perhaps you've heard of it. And Ariana was checking all the boxes, it seemed. She was working with passion on at work that just completely motivated her and guided her purpose. And she had a beautiful family. And she thought that she was doing a great job delivering at the very peak of her capabilities. And yet one morning, she woke up in a pool of blood. It was a very cold awakening call for her. She realized something had to change. She had to start taking better care of herself because she simply couldn't continue as she was. My goals for today are really simple. I'd like to explore with you what self-compassion is all about and how you can embrace that perhaps and look at it from the view of what is the case for it. Why should you even consider self-compassion for yourself in your leadership? Share some practical strategies and tips that you can embed in your daily life, and then we'll have Q&A. Does this work for everyone? All right. As professionals, we all feel like we are really athletes. We have to perform, we have to be mentally prepared. And when you start performing at your peak, when you really hit your pace in your career, you feel like you're unstoppable and you also cannot stop. Michael Jordan is perhaps one of the most well-known sports legends across the world. He's the American basketball player. He had so many victories. He took his team to glory. And yet, at the very peak of his career, a few things happened that made him want to take a new look at what he was doing in his life. He'd been plagued by a series of injuries. It seemed like he was not as successful as he was before. And just when he was feeling low, his father passed away. It was a crushing blow. And he decided that he was going to retire at what seemed like to be the very top of his career. It created shock waves across the world. And you know what he did? He took the year off, and it's something very unusual. He decided to play baseball instead. Here was an icon of American basketball, and he had gone on to try baseball. And there were people critiquing him, asking, was he mad? But what he was really doing was taking the time he needed to rehabilitate himself because internally he was not in a good place and he needed that break. And how can that manifest when we are thinking about our own careers? American German psychologist Herbert Fraudenberger coined the phrase burnout in the 70s. And every decade since, this term has only become more relevant in terms of number of people who link their mental health breakdowns to work, people who report at least once a week that they've had excessive pressure more than they find acceptable, people who feel that the pressures they face at work are contributing to their mental distress have only gone up. How many of you have heard of suicide rates in various countries, Europe, America, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, that are really disturbing? We even have words for it. You know something is extremely relevant when different languages have words for this term. Japanese call it karoshi. Chinese call it gualaosi. I hope I'm not murdering the terms. Koreans call it guarosa. Perhaps one compelling example for me, as someone from India originally, was the suicide of the CEO of a series of coffee shops. It was an MNC in India and the Middle East called Cafe Coffee Day. He was a quite celebrated CEO in India as someone who'd grown a local business and turned it into MNC. He was one of the examples of shining new India. And yet, one afternoon, Vijay Siddhartha wrote a letter to his shareholders and his family, apologizing for his failure as a leader. He walked out of his office and seemingly disappeared into thin air. 2 days later, his body was discovered on train tracks. What is the pressure doing to folks across the world? Can we do better as human beings, both towards ourselves and others? Nathaniel Branden writes in his book, The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, that self-acceptance is a refusal to be in adversarial relationship with yourself. If you can begin by being friends with who you are and accept that however you are, you're good enough, you can then stop wasting mental energy on that and focus on better things. As an executive coach, I've observed 3 broad sources of stress. And these are not necessarily separate and distinguished. They can overlap in many, many cases. One is your own expectations. Listen, the way you are, however you have behaved so far, has led you to this level of success. You have a way of being, and you have certain expectations and standards of yourself. It is because of these expectations and standards that you're able to be a top performer. And yet these expectations can actually be quite unkind and set unrealistic pressure on you. Another one is self-doubt. Have you heard of the term imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome happens to every person at some level or the other, at some point or the other. You must have experienced a moment of self-doubt, that niggling, nagging worry that all this respect, all these expectations, all these responsibilities on your shoulders are not deserved. You're probably going to drop the ball. Have you experienced it? That's self-doubt. That's imposter syndrome. That can be crippling. External pressure. Here you are hitting your best pace as a star athlete. You have your eye on the goal, all set to deliver. And then circumstances like what we're observing today, something unexpected comes and throws you off balance. Or people share what they need from you or expect from you, and there's enormous pressure from other people. External circumstances can create pressure on leaders as well. Are you experiencing any of these 3? Are these relevant to you? When you experience pressure, what happens? If you pause and think about it, there's some patterns that people fall into. Sometimes in a really difficult conversation, a negotiation, an interaction with a colleague or somebody external who's perhaps an important stakeholder, you fall into the habit of mind reading. We look at everything they're saying and doing and trying to project and understand what they might be thinking. A great example I have is I'm a speaker, and when I'm on stage and I'm making a point and in the middle of my speech and I see someone fiddling with their phone or not smiling when I set up a great joke that I've practiced and practiced, suddenly I'm like, oh my God, they don't like what I'm saying. They must think I'm very foolish. Have you ever done that? Mind reading is a terrible habit and a waste of energy. Overgeneralization. Oh my goodness, this is going to go on forever. It is the worst time ever for businesses. Overgeneralizing, taking one small fact and magnifying that and generalizing it and applying it to everything. I work in bias, and this is called affirmation bias too. Basically, you have a set of facts, and then everything in the world then is looked at through that filter. Magnifying. A simple example to understand this would be, say you have a little zit on your face and you're going into a meeting and you're convinced everybody is looking only at the zit, although nobody has noticed it. and you're like, oh my God, I'm just going to have to cover it. Maybe I'll just hold my hand against my face the whole time. Magnifying some simple or even imaginary flaw in yourself because to you it's become a big deal is magnification. Minimizing what your impact is, something wonderful you've done, and you don't take time to celebrate it. Just brush it aside, minimize, and say, no, not really. Have you ever done this? We do this with our clients where if we catch them not taking credit, not being and owning their leadership and their accomplishments, we remind them. Say, no, say, that's good. Thank you. I worked very hard at it. Don't say it's nothing. Are you minimizing your impact, your work, your efforts, your intentions even? Emotional reasoning. If you are not practicing being a mindful, reflective leader, something happens. Either your own expectations or your doubts or external circumstances or an event triggers an emotion in you. And that emotion results in you behaving in a certain way that is perhaps not how you want to behave or will not yield the results for you. For example, I know people who are extremely independent. The second someone gives them any suggestion, they respond very badly. Now, if they don't become aware of this trigger and they allow themselves to have this emotional reaction every time, even in delicate negotiations when they should be more balanced and less reactive, that emotional reasoning can sway the kind of decisions they make. The way they listen and the way they respond may be impacted by the way they reason through their emotions that are triggers to something else. Black and white thinking that the whole world is binary. It's either right or wrong. You're either with me or you're against me. This kind of thinking can be very limiting and actually very exhausting. I'm going to share with you an example of this shortly. Personalization. Oh my God, the world hates me. This is a sign from the universe that I need to stop. Nobody wants to listen to me. I should keep quiet in meetings. Have you heard anyone say this? Personalizing unrelated events and making it all about what you're not is a really bad habit and one that's very worth shaking off. Fortune telling, predicting the future, but predicting the future negatively is always going to suck. I'm always going to suck. The world is going into a tailspin. My business will fail for sure. Fortune telling and predicting the future is of no use unless you're an analyst and you have really robust, verified models that are replicable. You should probably leave fortune telling alone, especially about your own capabilities as a leader. Labeling. I'm a klutz. I'm silly. I am timid. I'm scared. Are you labeling yourself, and are those labels unfairly constraining who you can be? If you're able to shake off these labels, and as a coach, what we learn is that sometimes these labels are formed very early in your childhood. It could be someone mentioned something to you, or you formed an early reaction. You're observing the world through a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old's eyes, and to you, it came up. I'm powerless. And if that's how you've labeled yourself and you've never bothered to think about it and shake it off, you're going to view the world as I am powerless, or I am emotional, or I am weak. Are you labeling yourself? Can you shake that off? Can you stop it? Can you leave the labels be so that you can be the whole self that you are? Should statements. I had a really lovely conversation with one of my favorite coaches, and she pointed out that I said, I should go jogging tomorrow morning. Instead of saying I should go jogging tomorrow morning, which will most likely result in me not going, if I'd said I want to go jogging tomorrow morning, I might have better success. And I see this pattern as a coach with my clients as well. Anytime someone starts saying, I should have done this, I should be like this, the chances are really high that they're comparing themselves to a fictional, perfect person, and that perfection is unattainable. There is never going to be this ideal behavior that everyone should be like. This is simply not going to happen. Watch out for should statements. You catch yourself saying should statements to yourself, cut it out and change the tone immediately. I told you I'll share a story about my black and white thinking. How many of you have read the book To Kill a Mockingbird? Just let Meta know with a quick yes if you have. Um, to Kill a Mockingbird is a very famous story, and it's set in the deep south of United States, and it's about a lawyer, Atticus Finch, who is a fine, upstanding man, and he defends a black person who's unfairly convicted, and he saves his life. The whole story is told from the eyes of his daughter, Scout Finch. Um, for many fans of the book, Atticus Finch is the literary moral fiber. He's the perfect hero in terms of his intelligence, balance, humane worldview, and really his ability to stand up for what's right. As a young law student, Atticus Finch was my hero. I wanted to be like Atticus Finch, and I set my standards up. I was going to be Atticus Finch, or I was not good enough. When I brought that same energy, having successfully used it, and this is what I'd like to emphasize, is the way we are is often serving us well. We're actually having and embracing habits that brings us success. That is the tricky part about changing habits. So it had served me well to be ethical, focused on morality, because I was a lawyer and I wanted to do the right thing and be the right guide for my clients and show them the right way. And when I wanted to become a keynote speaker, working on bias because I cared about it, and I wanted to tell people and raise awareness about bias, when I wanted to be an executive coach and help people out of their own slumps and help them become better leaders, what I observed is this. Because I was harsh with myself, I couldn't really successfully engage them in a conversation about positivity and forgiveness and vulnerability. I had to step away from it. There was more than one way to be. You cannot always be Atticus Finch. And when you cannot be Atticus Finch, you're not a bad person. It's okay. Mistakes happen. When I learned to embrace kindness towards myself and say, Atticus Finch is fantastic. And when I'm not as good as Atticus Finch, I am still good enough. That's when I was able to help my clients too. Without an internal kind climate of acceptance, balance, fairness, and kindness towards myself, I wasn't able to shine that light for my clients and for my audience. That was a transformative journey for me. And I wanted to share that with you because I wanted to draw your attention to two ideas. One, however you are, whatever your habits are, you're probably an excellent professional because of it. But there is a possibility to be even better, to be the motivational leader, the inspirational leader, the beacon of light that your teams need you to be right now, your families need you to be right now. And for that, perhaps you can set aside some of these old habits and embrace being a kinder person to yourself so that you can then turn that kindness to others. I really like what Marshall Rosenberg says in his book, Nonviolent Communication. He says, the important aspect about self-compassion is to be able to hold both parts of yourself. You take the person who recognizes that you did something wrong, respect and value that. But you also need to be able to accept the person that made the mistake in the first place. Are you able to embrace and accept every part of you, even the ugly parts, even the weak parts, even the unsure parts? Do you have place in your life for vulnerability? Dr. Brene Brown, of course, does lots of work in this area. And I strongly recommend you check her work out if you're interested in this. So really, what is self-compassion? I hear a lot of different interpretations from clients, and I'd like to share them with you. Self-compassion is going to make me weak. It's going to make me vulnerable. You know, it's really the same as just pampering myself and being self-indulgent. It's not a good thing. Well, you know, the reality is self-compassion is the source of inner strength. When you are in a kind place for yourself, you're going to be able to be more courageous. You're going to be able to accept the setbacks that life brings you sometimes. And you're going to be able to focus on long-term thinking. Here's how. I made a mistake. It's a big one. And it's okay because I have growth mindset. I'm going to be able to learn from this and turn this mistake into an opportunity. And as long as I'm on this learning journey and I keep working on myself, I'm only going to get better and better. What that shows is the idea that tomorrow is more of the same. It is more possibilities, more positivity. And you have the opportunity every time you make a mistake to get better at it. That's how self-compassion can be a source of inner strength and courage. And don't we all need that right now? Courage, resilience, ability to think long term. Self-compassion is really about making excuses for bad behavior. No, it isn't. What I'd like for all of you to think about is that it is when you are in the growth mindset frame of mind, when you are able to admit that it's okay to make mistakes and you forgive yourself and you can learn from it, is when you're going to be able to take responsibility. Think about where we're at right now. If someone who's important and who's responsible for a lot of important functions and deliverables makes a mistake, would you rather they admit the mistake, be honest, learn from it and move on, or hide it or blame somebody else for it? We are seeing in action right now a president of a certain country who'll do anything but take responsibility. Is that a good model of leadership? Is that the kind of leader we can rely on? Here's one that perhaps struck close to me, that self-criticism is an effective motivator. I've always driven myself hard. I drive myself hard. I set high standards for myself and I drive my team hard as well. Is that familiar? It's certainly familiar to me. Well, you know what it does is it occupies a lot of your hard drive. If you're spending a lot of time with a near constant soundtrack of how awful you are, you better be careful, this is important, stop being foolish, stop being incapable, all of that eats up a lot of your mind space. If you can just silence that soundtrack and focus on doing your best, brushing off failure and moving on with new lessons learned and strong intentions, you're probably going to be able to be a much better leader. You can have high standards and you can also refuse to beat yourself up when you fail. Instead, you can focus on what the opportunity is. Does that make sense? Tara Brach is perhaps one of my favorite authors on this topic. She wrote a book called Radical Acceptance, and I'd love for all of you to check it out if you have the time. She says, feeling compassion in no way releases people from responsibility for their actions. Actually, what it does, it releases you from self-hatred that prevents you from responding to life with clarity and balance. Can you imagine being a leader? You could just focus on what you need to do, be self-aware with the right amount of balance and fairness, and see situations with absolute clarity. So you can focus on what you need to do and deliver the results. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Not to be muddled and chaotic and fatigued and stressed. What a lovely thing it is to practice acceptance and kindness, self-compassion. So, what's the case for self-compassion? It increases motivation. A 2011 study conducted by the University of California said that it increases your desire to do better. It boosts happiness. A 2000 study in the research in Personality Journal concluded passion links optimism, wisdom, personal initiative, and curiosity. Why does this happen? When you're kinder to yourself, you're going to be able to have a space that allows you to feel all that positivity. If you're in a negative frame of mind, you're not going to be open to all this opportunity to be positive. Body image. Can you imagine not feeling this great stress to diet and be physically fit, to get your 8 hours and yet perform at peak, always be able to be responsive and yet make sure you have your work-life harmony? Multiple studies have linked that when you are more kinder to yourself, you have a healthy body image, you have decreased body shame, fewer concerns around weight, and a greater appreciation for just the fact that you're healthy, that you're capable, you're able to function well. It serves you well. When was the last time you appreciated yourself for how healthy you are, how able you are? Have you taken a moment to do that? It can make a big difference. A 2011 study talked about how the self-worth is enhanced as a result of self-compassion. It was actually in the Journal of Personality Psychology Compass. It develops an ability to feel good despite adversity. It's a key component in being able to be resilient, to be able to overcome any adversity that comes your way and handle any setback that might happen. God knows we all have lots of unpleasant surprises, many times lobbed at us when least expected. Resilience to adversity then becomes a very important trait for leaders, not just for themselves, but also to be able to develop and support their teams in developing it in themselves too. A 2012 study in Clinical Psychology Review said that self-compassion, the practice of being kind to yourself, saying kind things to yourself, being comfortable in your vulnerability, increases mental well-being and decreases mental health problems. The statistics are really troubling. Very high percentage of people directly link their stress, their ill health caused by mental stress, and mental breakdowns directly to work. Very few times in these days that we hear mental well-being not being linked to anxiety and pressure at work. A great example for this is Kim Clijsters. How many of you have heard of this tennis prodigy? Just type in quickly in the chat box if you remember her story. For those of you who don't, Kim Clijsters was a tennis prodigy. She was predicted to be one of the greatest stars of her times. And when she was 23, poised at the very brink of her career trajectory, she had a breakdown. She was plagued with a lot of ill health, and she really felt almost as if she couldn't get out of the bed. So she took a 2-year break. In that 2 years' time, she learned how to take better care of herself, how to be more kind, how to be more accepting, and how to nourish herself. And when she came back, she was able to fulfill every single thing that was predicted for her. She's a 3-time Grand Slam winner. So what can we learn from Kim's stories? If you'll indulge me, I'd like to take you on a thought experiment. All right, are you ready? Imagine that you've dropped a cup of hot coffee on a newly cleaned beige carpet. Are you imagining it? How do you respond? What would your inner dialogue be? You've dropped a cup of coffee on a carpet, you know it's going to stain. If you're anything like a certain president of a certain country we know, you're probably going to blame someone else for it. Are you going to do that? Are you going to be angry at yourself? I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? Oh man, this is going to be an expensive mistake to correct. Do you avoid stressful situations? When something upsets you, do you tend to walk away from it? I'm not going to think about it. I do not have time to think about this right now. I'm just going to walk away. Do you avoid and distract yourself from that thought? You brush it off. Whoops. It's okay. No big deal. What are your reactions like? And
We have
some,
a couple of reactions from the group chat. Pearl has butterfingers, he said, and Axel's reaction before the oops came on the screen. He said, oops, that would be his reaction. And then we have from Binu that I just love the scent of Earl Grey. So that would probably be her reaction of, hey, seeing the positive in it. I love the smell of Earl Grey tea.
fantastic. Well, those of you who react with humor, who react with calmness and a sense of lightness, that's a very healthy reaction to these situations. But for those of you who respond with negativity or a stress reaction, if you tend to get irritated, mad at yourself, irritated about, oh my God, this is one more to do on my task list. I'm going to have to call somebody to clean the carpet. It's going to look ugly. If you're preoccupied with negative thoughts as a result of tiny trivial accidents, what I'd like to invite you to do is think about taking a breath and slowing down and bringing acceptance to these trivial incidents. You can either respond emotionally, get stressed out, or take that mood of negativity, of irritation, of unkindness to yourself, impatience, anger, stress, which will most likely influence the next interaction you have or the next decision you need to make. Take it with you like an emotional backpack into your next meeting, your next interaction, the next decision. Or you can let it be, put that emotional backpack aside, and just accept it. What would acceptance look like? Acceptance would look like, all right, so this happened. Why do I get angry with myself over such trivial things? Why is it important to me to be perfect and be flawless in execution of every single action? Could it be that I care about being timely? Was it because I needed to rush to something else? Was it because I don't like to make mistakes in front of other people? No judgment there. When you're practicing acceptance, you're both accepting the event that has happened and the emotions and thoughts that come up for you when that annoying or upsetting event happens. That is what acceptance is. So what would this self-compassion look like? Let me walk you through it. I'll give you a case study of a client of mine. She said that when her boss praises her colleague at work for a project both she and her colleague were both working together very, very hard at, and she was the lead of the project, and her boss praises her colleague, it upset her and made her feel inadequate, and her lifelong narrative of not good enough got triggered. So we wanted to examine how she can get better at coping with stress at work. So the first thing to do is to really just break down the facts. What happened? Can we ground it? What exactly about the incident triggered this spiral? Or even what incident or what event or thought triggered the spiral of negativity? So we identified that was that particular incident that made her mood bad and made her feel low and underconfident and stressed out. So let's look at that event. Exactly what was it? Did you do anything? No. It was simply that the boss, she, and her colleague were in a meeting, and the boss turned to her colleague and praised her. That's it. That's what happened. No judgment there. Those are the facts. So, what were the initial thoughts? Her initial thought when she had her boss praise her colleague, she felt, why not me? Did I do something? Is the boss thinking that perhaps I'm lagging behind? I'm a dead weight in this project? I'm supposed to be the lead. Shouldn't she have noticed me? Am I doing enough? These were her initial thoughts. What were her initial emotions? A sense of inadequacy, a sense that one more time she was not good enough, that she'd done something wrong. Envy that her colleague seemed to be performing better when she had so much at stake, when she cared so much about doing well? How can you take the same incident with the exact same facts and reframe it differently? We had a debriefing about a project, and the boss appreciated a piece of work that was done by my colleague. This bodes well for the project. It shows that the boss is able to see progress made and is appreciative of the progress made. It shows that you have a good, strong partner who's a capable and also interested collaborator on this project. It has absolutely no negative connotations for you because you have no way of being a mind reader or a fortune teller to predict exactly what's going to happen or what the boss might be thinking. Can you reframe this in a different way? Perhaps in a more positive, less judgmental way? And when you go through this exercise, can you examine your feelings about that incident now? Does it make you feel different? Is there a different emotion that comes up attached to the same memory? Are you able to look at this incident that has upset you with new clarity and a sense of balance that perhaps you did not manage to achieve before? I'd like to invite you all to start practicing self-compassion. What's important to realize is neurobiologically, your habits have embedded themselves and they've served you well. So no judgment there. What we're doing is trying on a new skill, a new tool in your tool set that perhaps might serve you well. So how can you pick up a new habit? If you have the habit of being harsh on yourself and being extremely driven and setting very high standards for yourself, how can you try self-compassion, a more kind internal environment? One is to observe others. This is very easy. You don't have to change yourself. Observing others and trying it down on others is actually an easier thing to achieve. So next time you're in a conversation at work, just observe people. Are they being unkind to themselves? Are they apologizing unnecessarily? Are they self-critiquing? Are they minimizing when someone gives them a complaint? Oh, no, you did a great job, Tim. Oh, that's nothing. I probably messed it up. You're too kind. Are you observing that in people amongst outside around you? Observe others. Observe how they are behaving about themselves. Second, if you have a soundtrack of self-critique, of inner negativity, try to change your tone. If you say, oh my God, I'm so clumsy, can you say, there it goes again, oops. Or as someone in the chat said, that Earl Grey sure looks great on the beak, smells great. Can you change your tone? Perhaps try for humor, try for non-judgment, try for positivity. Just observe and think of it as an experiment. It's playful. Try and play around with it and see perhaps if you can change your tone. How about accepting feelings? When we shame feelings, they're just going to get stronger. I have an example for you. Have you ever felt like giggling at an inappropriate moment? And have you ever tried to stop laughing? The more you try to control laugh, the more explosive it'll feel. It'll feel like your whole face will explode with laughter the more you try to control it. That's what happens with emotions. If you can look them in the eye and say, here it is, that's envy. And you might feel a bit awkward and embarrassing, but can we just accept that that feeling turned up? You didn't do anything. It's not a fault of yours that an emotion turned up that perhaps you're not so happy with. But can you just let it be and accept it? Can you validate? In the instance of the coffee cup or the instance of that person in the office whose boss made them feel inadequate, perhaps inadvertently, can we just say, that's okay? So that incident somehow triggered me to say negative things to myself. That's fine. Why is it important? What's happening here? And the last experiment, perhaps at level 1, would be if you must, absolutely must, self-critique, analyze it, dissect it. And a lot of us have a habit. I must admit, I am guilty of it. Axel was asking me earlier how I'm doing, and I was telling him, well, I'll know tomorrow and day after. if you have the habit of self-critique, what you should do is set a timetable. Say, okay, next 10 minutes, next 15 minutes, I'm going to analyze and dissect everything I did and said in that important meeting. And then I'm done. I'm going to walk away from it because I budgeted time, my self-critique, and I'm done. When you're mindful and you allow it and legitimize it, it stops becoming so overpowering. At level 2, if you feel like those 4 things you could try, you've played around with it, and you want to try something more, expand yourself a little bit more, if you are looking to embrace self-compassion, consider the next time you're castigating yourself about some important thing that you dropped the ball on. If you got a letter from a friend who loves you, who respects you, who admires you, who knows you well, what would that friend say in that letter to you? Would he or she say, "You're great, you're wonderful, exactly as you are. You mean well. You work so hard. You care so much. You're doing the very best you can." Would your friend say that? Would you be able to write a letter to yourself as that friend? How about this? If a young mentee came to you and said exactly what you're grappling with, she or he has the exact same situation, and they say to you, "Oh, I'm feeling miserable. I'm just so mad at myself. I feel like this is a write-off. I should just walk away from like I'm not good enough." If they said that to you, what would you tell them? What would your advice be? How would you counsel them? How would you mentor them? And if neither of these work, how about writing a letter to that part of you that's cringing, that's pummeling yourself, boxing yourself with hatred and anger and unkindness and displeasure? And you write a letter from the confident, calm, balanced, positive self. They're both parts of you in you, aren't they? Both the positive, courageous, confident self and the harsh self-critic. Could the positive self write a letter to the harsh critic? Could you do that? Do any of these practices interest you? Might they be something you could play with, experiment with? These are simple ways in which you can try and see if self-compassion is something you could perhaps try and bring more into your daily practice as a person, as a professional, as a team member and a team leader. I'm just doing a time check to make sure we're doing okay. Christopher Gava said in his book, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, that self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we give to others. Can you practice this? I had a breakthrough with the coachee. She was telling me how she was really cross with herself and how she's not at all happy with her performance. And when I said, what would you do if a mentee came and shared this with you? She had this aha moment and she said, I tell her not to worry about it. I tell her it's such a small, trivial thing, not to take it so seriously, and that she'll be okay. And then she realized all she had to do was to extend that same positive, encouraging tone to herself. That's all it is. Meghan Markle made news waves across the world when she stepped away from her royal duties because as a new mother, she was feeling fatigued. She was due to travel to Africa and she said, I can't, and I need to take time off. When was the last time you took care of yourself? It's really like being on the flight. If you need to put on the oxygen mask, if you try to put it on someone else before you put it on yourself, you're going to faint and not be of use to anybody. Self-care, self-compassion first, before you can turn that positivity, kindness, nurturing, motivating, inspirational light to other people. So what are the benefits of self-compassion practice? To be better leaders and better humans, it helps you get organized mentally. It forces you to slow down. It helps you be more aware. You're more mindful. You're having a more balanced assessment of yourself, of the circumstances, of your own expectations, your own viewpoint of the world. It gives you a sense of agency and control. You no longer feel that your negative, failing self is who's driving the car. And despite your best intentions and efforts, you're a prisoner of that inability, of that inadequacy. That's going to go away. And you're going to say, I am the driver of this car and I'm in control. I can be kind. I can overcome this accident, continue on my journey. It helps you think more rationally and clearly because a lot of your brain space is going to be free now because you're not spending all your time being nasty to yourself. It helps you become more reflective rather than reactive. And don't we all need to be leaders who are more reflective rather than reactive? Because you're going to pause and really see things for facts and not moods or emotions. Separate negativity and see with clarity and balance. It gives you the confidence that you broke bad mental habits. Every single one of these means that you're going to be a better leader and a better human being in general. I've taken you through a lot of steps that typically you would need perhaps a little bit more effort. And Tara Brach, who wrote Radical Self-Compassion, Self-Acceptance, shares a very simple framework that I'd like to take you through. It's very simple. And what I want you to do is just think through the last incident you were all thinking of. If you'll give me permission, think about an incident that you're upset about. And are you able to recognize what happened, separate facts and emotions? Are you allowing whatever happened to be, accepting both your emotions and your thoughts and whatever events have taken place? Are you able to explore it with childlike curiosity, investigate with kindness? The whole intent of this framework is to help you develop a higher natural awareness so that you can watch thoughts go through and not be impacted by them. You're watching negativity, stress, anger, impatience, and just letting it through and saying, it's okay. I see it. I'm okay. It's all going to be fine. Are you able to raise that natural awareness? What's the one self-compassion practice that you want, not should, but want to start from today? Can you quickly type in the chat box? Let Meta know. Any of the practices we've discussed. What's one self-compassion practice you can pick up? We wanted to share with you a coaching experience. And this is what a coaching experience would be. Coaches create safe space for you to be able to process what your challenges and intentions and goals might be in a safe way. Create that space for you to be able to explore yourself, your mind, your heart, co-create some lovely goals for yourself, some solutions perhaps. Challenge you gently along the way to try and get you to perhaps expand your horizons and see new possibilities, explore new ways to be, new patterns of thinking, new habits you can embrace. And finally, coaches enable you by being partners with you to make sure you're able to execute, embed, and practice these goals that you've set for yourself, these solutions that you've designed for yourself. We have a range of coaches at MetaMind Training. We have Ivana Fertitta, who's a social psychologist. We have Axel Johansson, who's a coach, trainer, and consultant. You have me, and you have Mette Johansson, the CEO and founder of MetaMind Training, who's a coach, consultant, trainer, and keynote speaker. So if you're curious about coaching and want to explore it, we are currently offering a 20-minute exploratory session. So do reach out to us and let us know. Coaching changed my life. It was transformational for me, and that's the reason why I'm so passionate about it. It can create new possibilities for you, and shouldn't everyone enjoy that. With that, it's time for Q&A. Meta?
Thank you so much, KG. I immediately want to mention that the RAIN framework got a couple of votes for things that people want to be doing with self-compassion going forwards. So everyone on the call, if you have a question, feel free to simply unmute yourself. We're not that many people on the call today. Of course, as always, you're allowed to also drop me a private message in the chat function. If you want to do this anonymously, we're still recording. We'll stop it soon as well. Feel free to do it in the group chat, unmute yourself, or send a message to me. Whilst you're thinking about your questions, let me drop you one, KG. Now, this is one of the things that I have heard from people in those times where there's a lot of people who are so much worse off than we are, who still have a job, who still have a calling, who still have our health. So doesn't it seem very selfish to be self-compassionate at these times? What do you say to people who ask that?
In that thinking that it is selfish to be self-compassionate, I'm hearing judgment. So why would somebody feel that being kind and positive and being able to look at things with positivity is selfish? Can we explore that? Can we try and reframe it? What thoughts and emotions come up for you when you think about slowing down and looking at yourself with greater positivity? The very fact that someone worries about being selfish gives me an indication that they're likely not going to be very arrogant or selfish or deluded. You're probably thoughtful, careful persons with high EQ. So I'd love to explore with people who are fearful of self-compassion that it is not self-indulgence or selfishness. It is a very worthy investment in yourself. When you create a healthy, nurturing, positive environment inside, it's only then you're going to be truly able to give that to other people.
All right. I do respect that we are nearing the scheduled end of what we are planning this call to be like. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. And of course, if you have other plans on the hour, also feel free to leave at this point of time. Any other questions? When and where should we stop self-criticism is being asked right now in the chat box. KG.
Would you like to unmute yourself and share what your idea of self-criticism is?
Satish, this is from you. Not sure whether he can unmute himself. Let me try unmute Satish.
And while we're waiting, I can quickly share with you my perspective, and I invite all of your opinions as well. I think what's important is to really just ground the facts. If you have an event or episode or a certain pattern in mind, are you able to specifically look at that incident or event or past behavior and really say what truly happened and what is your interpretation of it? What actually is the fact? What are your thoughts and emotions? They're two separate things. And when you're able to do that, you're able to look at it in a more fair and balanced way. Does that answer your question? And would you like to share more about your question, please?
Satish, I've unmuted you, so you should be able to talk. It doesn't seem to work. So let's hear any other questions from anybody on the call. I have another question for you that I prepared beforehand. Can I ask that?
Please do, Meta, please do.
All right. What if you are working in a very tough, masculine, aggressive environment where, you know, emotional intelligence is not valued very highly, toughness is appreciated. You don't want to be seen as weak, do you, in an environment like that? What do you do?
I completely empathize with that. It's unfortunate, isn't it, Meta, that a lot of organizations are really built with this inbuilt systems and processes that make aggression and obsession with result so important that perhaps the softer aspects of humanity, kindness and forgiveness and just being approachable are not really valued. They're not really seen as the essential parameters of successful leaders. I completely empathize with this query. And to those who are in these situations, I'd say to you that in one-on-one interactions, in individual acts that you undertake as a person, as a professional, as a team member, as a team leader, you can stay true to your values and your true preference of kindness and nurturing. Some of the greatest leaders in the world are the ones who stood against the wave of everyone else and made the right calls and said, my people need kindness, or the ecosystem and the community requires me to withdraw that product. I need to be responsible and accept that I made a mistake. Doing the right thing is always something that is available to you.
It sounds like it takes a lot of courage, right? And courage is kind of the opposite of weakness. So if you're afraid of appearing weak, well, you can probably reframe it to see it as courage to do what you believe is right.
And it's about building a legacy as a leader. Who do you want to be known as? Who do you want to be for yourself? If you want to be a positive person who stands for the right thing, take the right action, listen to yourself. And if the organization is that toxic, little by little, you'll observe that other people will take notes from you and perhaps start embracing a better way of being. Or maybe in time, they'll recognize the value in doing the right thing.
Fantastic, thank you. There is one more question. How can we use the RAIN framework to get us better prepared for recovering from COVID-19 at work?
Especially now, more than anything else, I think compassionate leadership is the need of the hour. That's the reason why MetaI and everyone at MetaMind Training picked these topics. Enormous pressure, almost crippling people, the sense of responsibility and the sense of impending doom. Now is the time to be compassionate to other people, to accept that perhaps productivity, micromanaging your teams, knowing exactly what they're doing any given minute, exactly making sure that they are delivering as you designed it in winter last year or January this year before this hit. That is not the focus. The focus now is to inspire people, provide them that safety, that it's going to be fine, that you will do your very best as a team leader to take care of them. And worst case, everyone will take a tiny little hit just to survive together. In order for you to be able to do that, you need to begin by being compassionate with yourself first. If you drive yourself to the wall, trying to worry about everything and making sure everything is exactly as you need it to be, are you going to be in any position to help others? Starts with self-compassion and moves on to compassion. That's why the RAIN framework. That makes sense? Does that answer your question? Please unmute yourself and do share with us.
That was from Ravi, yes. Did that answer your question, Ravi? Yes, it did, to everyone. All right. Now, we are going to wind this up now. It is 9 o'clock in Singapore and even in India, although you're a couple of hours earlier than us. So we are very happy to continue in a more casual manner in just a few minutes. First, I'd like to share the reason for why we did these 3 masterclasses. Those are uncertain times right now. We're all feeling it. It's the extra stress. It's not knowing what's going to be there. And yes, of course, that is difficult. We have shared 3 different topics with you. We started off with leading with values, which hopefully makes it easier for you to sleep at night by having some tools to take the right choices, which are your values. Then we went on to be a compassionate leader. How do you deal with people in these times? People do need that little bit of extra compassion from their bosses. And today was about leading with self-compassion. It is a little bit, that image came to me of being in an airplane, and it's about putting on the oxygen yourself first before you help others. You will not have the energy to help others if you don't take care of yourself. So we got lots of tips about how to take care of ourselves, not kicking ourselves, how to reframe things, how to avoid black and white thinking, avoiding the should framing of things, minimize how we sometimes minimize things and sometimes magnify things. We had loads of tips today from KG on how to take better care of yourself in times of uncertainty. With that, thank you so much for joining us, and do stay on if you want to get a drink and continue the discussion with us.